and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 208. Today we're going to be talking about the notion of focus stacking. It's a kind of a bit of a technical thing with photography, not necessarily to everybody's taste, but to some people it could be really quite important. A little bit of a journey here as I've been kind of exploring the idea of what it is, how to do it, where the advantages are, and sometimes where the disadvantages are. So stick around for that. Meanwhile, if you happen to be watching us live here on YouTube, leave a comment down below. Say hello, tell me your name, tell me where you are, tell me what the weather's doing, and we'll make a start. So yes, welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. If you're looking to improve your understanding of photography, then this is the place to be. And particularly today, I think this has been quite a journey for me coming to grips with focus stacking as well. So yeah, you're going to get a chance to kind of follow me as I've kind of learned a bit more about it all. Meanwhile, yeah, I can see we've got a couple of comments in already. Nadia has joined us and said, hello everyone from a very dull and cloudy Fife. April says, greetings from an overcast Long Island, New York. And Maggie says, hello from a dull and a bit chilly in Castle Douglas. And it is indeed a bit dull and chilly. After yesterday, which felt like, ooh, summer has finally arrived in Scotland, it seems to have become autumn overnight. Right, okay. So, what are we going to be talking about? What is this notion of focus stacking? Actually, just before we get on to that, a quick update on the leaderboard, the Smug Points Leaderboard. So far, for the well, basically, yes, because we're now into September. So the Smug Points winner for August was Marilyn. Well done, Marilyn. Marilyn accumulated 60 points. And just managed to kind of pip a couple of other people at the post. So Marilyn won the Smug Points challenge, and as such gets to choose the challenge for this month, which she's already sent to me. So I'll be talking about that one a little bit later. Make sure you stick around for that. Also on this episode, Nadia has sent in an image for a bit of feedback as well. So I will be chatting about that one a little bit later as well, after we've talked about the focus stacking. So plenty to come up. Oh, John's joined us so from Columbus, Ohio. So it's a very hot week there. Excellent. Okay. Right. So I know there's a couple of people who can't make it along today to the live version, but will be tuning in as soon as they can. So hello to all the usuals. Now, right, okay, let's move on then to this notion of focus stacking. And what is focus stacking? Well, basically, it's the idea that you can't always get everything that you want in focus in the one picture. Even if you narrow down your aperture, and we know from previous podcasts that when you narrow your aperture, you get a deeper depth of field. So when you have a wide aperture, you have a shallow depth of field, narrow aperture, deep depth of field. And a deep depth of field allows more stuff to be in focus. Shallow depth of field, very little is in focus. But even with a narrow aperture, sometimes you can't always get everything in focus that you want. And part of this, today's episode was inspired by Robert last week in our macro challenge, put in a photo of a guitar that he'd taken using the notion of focus stacking, whereby what he'd done was he'd taken 140 photos of the guitar and, you know, close up, and then you use the software in order to overlay them. And if you've got the right piece of software, then it detects where the sharp bit is in each of these photos. And you take a photo and then you tweak the focus, and you take another photo and you tweak the focus, and you take another photo and tweak the focus. And if you get it right, every little bit of that picture can be in focus. Now, it's actually, on the one hand, fairly straightforward, on the other hand, very difficult. And a lot depends on the subject matter, on the technology, on the equipment you've got and that you've got access to. But it's more than just technology and equipment. It's also about understanding. You've still got to understand essentially your rules of photography, or your sense of aesthetic with photography, of what you're trying to achieve with photography. And like every form of photography, there are some genres, some kinds of things that lend themselves better to one kind than they do to another. And that's really what I'm going to be exploring here. Oh, Meg says hello everyone as well. Hi Meg, glad you could make it. Right, so let's talk a little bit about then this notion of what happened. So you may remember when we were doing the macro challenge, and I was playing around with, so I've been playing around with little Batman figure and some cones and stuff like that. And then there was that notion of, well, what happens about this idea of focus stacking? Because very often, most people tend to use it in the context of macro photography. So let me just show you a photo here. So let's take one of these cones that I was playing around with. And I've taken this photo, and this photo is, so it's with my macro lens, it's a 100mm lens. And it zoomed in, and I've got this at f20. So at f20, this is a very narrow aperture. There's not a lot of leeway within this. So what have I got? f20, I had to do it a 15th of a second. It ends up at ISO 2,500. And what happens is, even at f20, which is very narrow, it's about, I think f22 is about as narrow as actually my that lens goes. We can see, well, it's nicely sharp in the front here, but as we get about halfway along, it drops off, and by the time we get to the back end of this cone, it's completely out of focus. So my f20 hasn't allowed me to get the entire cone in focus. So what I did was I went to, let's see, if I go to cones, no, not that one, and so the way around this is, what you do is so I took about 9 photos of the cones, and I thought, well, I'll do a quick try this out. And I took 9 photos, and then I shoved it into a little focus stacking element in Photoshop, waited for a few minutes for it to sort out. And then I ended up with pretty much this photo. And what we can see from this one is it's sharp at the front, that's great, and it's also sharp at the back. That's great. So for 9 photos, and what I did was I went click, so I focused it in, I had the camera on a tripod, I went click, adjusted the focus, click, adjusted the focus, click, adjusted the focus, and I did that through about 9 increments until it started with the front was in focus, finished with the back in focus. However, there is a thing here whereby if you don't have enough increments in between, if you've got a fairly, I mean, this was, I did at f5.6, but what we find is, while most of it is sharp, not all of it is. If we come in to say this bit of cone here, we can see nice and sharp on the point here, sharp there, but it's blurry around that bit, it's blurry around that bit, it's blurry around that bit. There are blurred patches within the cone. It's not working particularly well. So it's fine in some places, but it's not all the way through. Now, when I took that, I was in a rush doing other things. I thought, I'll just give it a quick try, see what happens. Did this, played with it, and realised, okay, something's not right here. I'm going to have to go and play around with it later. So that was kind of my starting point. Now, hold on. I have managed to disconnect. Throw everything off. Am I still there? Right, hopefully coming back. Hoping I didn't lose you all there. I may well have. I accidentally clicked off the wrong piece. Okay, I think I'm still here. If somebody wants to give me a little note in the chat and say, yes, you did disappear for a moment, or no, you didn't, that would be fine. Okay, oh, Robert's joined us, says, howdy all from Texas. Right, okay, where are we at? Hold on one sec. Did I disappear?
Yeah, it stopped for just a minute while you were doing that thing.
Okay, but it's back now. Okay, oh, Nadia says I didn't, but Maggie's just come in and said I did. Right. Anyway, okay, so I disappeared for some of you, and I'm still here for some of the rest of you. And now, I don't know, it looks like on that bit that I'm sort of not looking very clear, a little bit out of focus. Maybe it's just low res. Oh, Janet's joined us, says, hi from a warm Victoria. My luggage tripod went to Nanaimo? somewhere else anyway for me, so no sunrise this morning. Ah, that's a shame, Janet. John says he never lost me. Okay, well, that's a bit of a pity, Janet. It must have been a real pain that you sort of fly off somewhere and then your luggage goes somewhere else. Right, okay, so let's come back to this then. So we've got a couple more of you joined us, and so far just talking about introduction to this idea of I did a quick photo of a cone, did a quick bit of focus stacking just to see how it went, and it worked but then didn't completely work, and I thought, right, okay, I'm going to come back to this later. So with that in mind, I've now been on a little bit of a journey of focus stacking, trying to find out what's going to work and what's not going to work. So where are we going to go? So what I'm going to do then is I decided, first of all, I started looking up the notion of focus stacking, and one of the things that came up was sometimes it's used in landscapes as well. We're forgetting about macro site and things like that. There's landscapes. There's the idea that sometimes you want something in the foreground in focus, and at the same time you want the distant hills in the focus. Now, the weather wasn't great here while I was trying to put all this together. I was running out of time, and so I thought, well, okay, let's just take a couple of quick photos out of the back garden window. So what I did is I got my camera and I literally stuck it on the back window, pressing it against the window in order to kind of act as a kind of semi-tripod thing. And what I did was, here we have, we're looking out the back garden at the window. In the foreground is an old bit of glass door and stuff like that, which when we shifted something out and keep meaning to get round to sorting out and didn't quite. But we've got a couple of, little bit of plant life. So I started off focusing on this bit. And then slowly I kind of started adjusting my focus until we now get to a point whereby we've got the bird feeders in focus. Obviously we've not got around to sticking the seeds in them just at the moment. And then as I kind of go down, more bits of and then other bits so we get down here, little patch of grass there getting into focus, until we kind of get towards the end where eventually the shed at the back of the garden is in focus. So again, once again, I've done about 9 shots, and I'm just going click, incremental, click, incremental. So again, f5.6, 70 millimeters, and so that gives me, across those 9 images, it's not too bad. Kind of gives me that sense of a sense of depth. So what do we do with these? So now if I go over to Photoshop, and let's say I take these 9 images and I just drag them into Photoshop and that, and then there's a sequence we're going to go through. So I go up to File, Scripts, and load files into Stack. Now, if you're using a different program, you'll have your own way of doing it. At this point, I can click Add Open Files, click OK. And what this is going to do is it's going to take each of the images and it's going to slot them into one Photoshop file. So here it is. We can see now that I've got this Photoshop file over here that all the images are stacked on each other. But what do we notice is if I move them about, that I didn't even though I had the camera pressed quite tightly against the window, it wasn't actually, every time I clicked, I moved it slightly. So what I need to do is align the layers. So what I do is I select all these layers, make sure they're selected. Now I can go to Edit. That's right, Edit, Auto Align Layers. So what that's going to do is it's just going to line the layers up for me. Now, there is actually a step where I can kind of put 2 bits in between. If I do that, the whole thing just really chugs. And so what we can see here now, you can tell by the fact that the edges don't quite line up everywhere, that it's had to make little subtle adjustments to line them all up. But that's fine. So now what happens is if I take that bit off, the walls are in the same place. So now finally I go to Edit, and now I can auto blend the layers. In the auto blend, I make sure it's on the stack images, not the panorama. Seamless tones and colors, that's fine. And then I can click OK. There's also an option there if I want to sort of do the generative fill to tidy up the edges. And here we go now. And what we can see is the front bit here is in focus, and the shed in the back is in focus. So it's taken all the focus bits and put them together. Except And it hasn't worked seamlessly, because what happened is, if we look at this bit of plant here, it's all blurry around the edges, and then this bit's missing, and then we've got another bit over here and it's blurry there, and then there's more bits missing there, and it's done a real dog's dinner when it comes to this plant in the foreground. It's just not really worked very well at all. Likewise, there's even little bits of leaves in the back here which haven't, I thought these trees in the back were fine, but they're not. So what was the problem? So the problem here was essentially that there was wind blowing. The wind was blowing, and the leaves were moving around, and the little plant life was moving around. So when it came to lining it all up, Photoshop hasn't quite know what bit to do. And so different layers, it might be that this little bit here, and it's moved to that bit, and then it's moved to that bit, but that bit, this bit of leaf, was in a completely different place. So actually, we're kind of into a problem here, that if you're outdoors and you're doing something moving, that you're really setting yourself up against the ability, you're making it particularly difficult for your software to actually interpret which bits to put in focus and which not. So, okay, well, that's not overly work then. So what are we going to do? So I thought, well, okay, let's I'll just, let me close those ones down. I thought, well, the next thing to do then is let's drag it into the studio. And I thought, well, I'll play around with the tabletop thing. So I kind of got the tabletop bit out. I stuck down a couple of cones like I did with the Batman macro stuff that we were doing a couple of weeks back. And then I started playing around a bit more. I thought, well, okay, what if we set up a table system and we put a whole bunch of images in together? And just noticed Sandra's joined us and says, hi everyone from a warm and cloudy Birmingham. Oh, that's good. Somebody's got warmth somewhere. Oh, well, no, John had warmth though, too. So, yes, meanwhile, where are we? Okay, so let me just open that one. And some of you may have seen I've dropped this one into the Facebook page. I decided to do a setup where we've got a whole bunch of things. What I decided, here's my camera. And here's a little setup at the back. So I've got a tabletop, little wooden tabletop sitting on top of a stool. I've got a little kind of it's the back of a reflector, kind of white thing going on. But what I decided to do was run a tape measure right down the middle of it. And then I put a bunch of random objects. So let's go to, no, not that one. Let's go to tabletop. And on the tabletop, so what we've got is we've got this tape, we've got a pine cone, we've got a banana, we've got a mug, got an espresso pot, and it's tape measure running front to back, got Batman's, little Lego Batman standing behind a magnifying glass, and an apple. So it's just random things pulled together, but basically we also have a kind of, it's kind of yellow and black colour scheme here, more or less, with a couple of extra burnt coffee and red bits of apple thrown into it. Now, this is what I did with this one. Is again, it's set at f5, and I thought, well, okay, let's. I think am I using the focal length 38. Which I can't even remember what lens I'm using here. Right, okay, must have been using my 24-70 lens here. Focal length set at 38mm. And then I start going through a set of increments and realizing I wanted to get the front to the back. So, we start here, you can see the front part is in focus, but the back isn't. And then I start going through, and we notice if I go a couple more here, the front part is now getting out of focus, but we can follow the focus up the tape measure, in sharp there, out of focus there. I move through a couple more, it's now getting more focus down there. And basically what I did was I did 21, I think it was, until we get right to the back, and now that back piece of cloth there is now in focus with all its crinkles and everything else. So, okay, now we've got something to try. So what we're going to do now is we take what is it? 23 items. That's right. So we take 20. Now, I will say what I have also done with these is I've shrunk all these down a little bit. Otherwise, we'd be sitting here for half an hour to try and get everything working. Having said that, there's still going to be a little bit of a wait. So I'll go through to load files into stack, add the open files, and then OK. And now it's working it out. It's putting them all into the one file. Certainly thinking about it. And there we go. So we've got them all into the file. So now I scroll down, I select them all. So we've got all the layers selected, and then I file, it's not file, edit, auto align. So we're just going to now line them up. Now this, unfortunately, is then going to take a little bit longer because we've now got 23 images rather than 9 images. It's really trying to set them up, and plus there's quite a lot going on. It's a busier kind of photo, this, running from front to back. So, meanwhile, if you want to leave comments, have a chat, a little bunk, ask me something, tell me what the weather's doing while we're waiting. I can always take a little look. And where are we? Let's flick back to here. Is this done now? Right, okay. So now these are all aligned. I can go to edit, auto blend the layers. And again, make sure it's on the stack images, not the panorama. And I click on that. This tends to go slightly quicker than the auto align. And right now it says creating seamless composition. And now we can see it is in focus on the front with part of the tape. And if we go to the back, it's also in focus on the back part of the tape. So it's worked. Great. 23 layers. At F5, I've got the front to the back in focus. Mostly. Because actually, again, it's not necessarily got everything where I wanted it. If we can go to Batman here, we can see that there's bits of table in focus in front of him, but not behind him. It's not necessarily got that bit. But also, worse than that, is even if you forgave the bit within the magnifying glass, to the side of the magnifying glass, it's not really worked. There's a big blurry patch here where it hasn't got the detail of the table. It hasn't got this bit here where the strap of the tape measure overlaps the magnifying glass. Around the edge of the magnifying glass handle, again, we can see it's really it's gone blurry. And part of that problem is because the individual photos, when they were out of focus, when we come back to something like, we go back to that, say that first image here. No, that's the last image. That's that one here. Or, no, not that one. Try something like that. Yeah. Ah, that's what I was looking for. When we come back to this first image here, where the front is in focus, if you look at this part of the Batman handle, because it's not sharp, because it's blurry, it spreads out. It's wider, considerably wider than the sharp bit of Batman's handle, which, okay, if you look at where the sharp edge is, but the edges, the outside the edges of the sharp bit in a different part of the stack were blurry. And so you come across this major problem here, that it's where you've got a lot of out of focus and a fairly plainish background or something going on behind, you're running into this problem of it not being totally sure which bits to include and which bits not to include. So while this isn't bad, it's not actually very brilliant. Really, if I just say, take this and lay a flatten image, what I might have to do, if it was really an important image and I was wanting to do a lot with it, what I might have to do is actually start using little bits of Photoshop and tidying it up a bit. So I might use the clone tool from a bit here and just start kind of actually adding bits more background to it. So it's giving me most of it, but I would still have to kind of go in and clean it up as such. So this isn't necessarily depending on the kind of photo you're doing. So although the wind isn't blowing it about all over the place, we do have this problem with the fact that it's the kind of style, with it being so deep and there being so much blur in other places, that the computer just isn't able to fully get, even though I'm using 23 increments instead of 9, it's not enough. Now, maybe if I did 140 increments, it might work. To be honest, I didn't really want to give it that much of a try. To go back to Robert's one of the guitar that I think he did, I think he had a better starting point because he was basically using one object. So what else can we try then? So having then, let's get rid of these. No, I'm gonna. So I'll just close those ones down. Next up then, I decided to kind of go into the garden, and I thought, well, okay, let's try a little cluster of something. And I decided to go for a bunch of cones sitting on a fence post and see what we could do with that. Now, with this, we end up with, I took this photo. Now, this photo is again at f20. So I took an f20 with my camera to try and get as much into focus as I could. And what we find is, yeah, nice and sharp at the beginning here. But actually, before we've got to the back of the cones, it's already gone out of focus. However, there's quite a lot of focus of the building behind and bits of stuff here. So it's quite a kind of, the cones aren't really standing out in the way that I would want them to. So, where are we? Go to that one. Whereas, if I take a photo like this, where I've now gone to, like, I'm using an f2.8, the background becomes nice and blurry. Now, the problem is here, we've got nice cones in the front here, but they're kind of a bit blurry, you know, very blurry at the back. Now, what I should really have done with this one is show you the kind of finished option. But if what we do, let's just say we install, because I took 25. Now at this point, what I should say, let's have a, let me come back here. Okay, sorry, what Sandra was saying, this seems very complicated. I'm glad we haven't got these options in Photoshop Elements. Well, again, once you've kind of done it a few times, it's not necessarily that complicated, but it's complicated trying to get the exact results you want. And this is kind of where I'm trying to go with this. In fact, I'm kind of thinking maybe I am overcomplicating the matter. What happened next was that Robert came back to me, because if you remember last week, I gave Robert bonus 5 points for just having the patience to sit down and do 140 shots with tiny little increments all in one go. And then Robert actually came back and let me just go to here, and he said, wanted to let you know I did not click out 140 photos. The R5, the Canon R5, because Robert uses exactly the same camera that I do, has a focus bracketing setting where you set the number of photos and the increment, it will it will change the focus and create the stack. So you get the number of photos you've put in. So basically you program the camera, go click, and it does them all. You don't have to keep manually turning it all the time. And then what he did was he was using the software called Helicon, which he said was very easy to use and is designed specifically for photo stacking. And so I thought, well, okay, that's pretty good then. So I'm just noticing, I think there's a long delay here between what I'm saying and what's appearing on the screen now. Okay, meanwhile, sorry, that's me getting distracted. Let me come back. So the Canon R5 has an ability so that you can set how many shots you want it to have and what your increments are, and it will sort of shoot it for you. Now, I had no idea the R5 did this, because I'd not really tried focus stacking until we decided we were going to do this thing on for this podcast. So what I will say is, Robert, you get to keep your bonus 5 points precisely because I had no idea my camera did that. So what I decided to do then was I went back out into the garden and, well, forget these cones on the thing. I took a bunch of strawberries. Yeah, Robert says, now that you know I didn't do the 140 clicks manually, I should lose the 5 smug points. I think, yeah, this is you being behind here. No, you get to keep them because you introduced me to something on my camera I didn't know existed. Now, so what I decided to do next was I thought, well, I'm going to go out into the garden and I'm going to do something smaller here. While I was online chatting about, when I put up about the fact that I was going to talk about focus stacking, there's another photographer I know called Steve Hill who does quite a lot of food photography, and he says he always uses photo stacking for his food photography. And when I asked him about that, why, he said because it allows you to get all the bonus of when you use a really wide aperture, you get all the soft bokeh and everything else, but you could still get the nice detail. So there are advantages to it. So I thought, well, okay, I'm missing out on something here, so I want to try something else out. So what I did was I decided I would get a bunch of strawberries, and I got this sort of bunch of strawberries and I put them onto a glass plate and just went out in the garden. I put the camera on a tripod, only at this point I will have to say, because I got this down on the grass, my tripod was too high to be on this, so I actually had to kind of invert the tripod and have my camera hanging upside down, and then afterwards turn all the images the right way up. The lengths I've gone to for you guys just to try and do this, work out how to do this, is just probably more than any other podcast I've ever done. It's also a shame the fact that probably most of you aren't interested in this at all, because it's a load of complicated technical which many of you won't use. However, for the couple of you that might use this, I'm hoping this podcast stays useful. So what we have here is we've got a bunch of strawberries, and as we can see, part of it's in focus, and so this is your kind of typical, almost macro kind of close-up shot of a bunch of strawberries, bokeh dropping away, and I've got this set at an f2.8. Okay, so nice wide aperture. But this is where it's really going to come into its own. Sorry, let me just click back to here. What I'm going to do is I set this up for 25 images. And in fact, what I found was afterwards, I don't even need as many as 25 images. If I take my strawberry pile here, so here we've got all the 25 going from sharp at the front to sharper at the back, I found that actually this kind of setup where you've not got gaps running from in between, you've not got moving parts, you've not got large other things which are going to sort of seem blurrier against the background, that although I took 25, I didn't need as many as 25. In fact, I can pretty much cut this in a third. If I just select these images here, so what have we got? 9 images, and I'll drag them in. Now I go to, again, it's fairly straightforward. Once you know the sequence, File, Scripts, and then load files into stack. At this point, add open files and click OK. And you can see as they're kind of appearing, again, getting more focus to the front. Okay. However, despite the fact that I had it on a tripod and I set it to click, you see they still didn't they weren't necessarily lining up absolutely. So I go to, I make sure I select all the layers. So the layers are all selected over here. Then I can go to Edit, Auto Align Layers, and click OK. And now it's lined them all up so that when I take them off, that's all fitting fine. And now I can go to File, Edit, and Auto Blend, and the stack images. So you can see that it's basically, once you know the sequence, and if you've got a different software, honestly, Google it, and photo stacking it, will tell you the sequence on how to do it. And this is now auto-aligned. And now, if I just layer flatten image, we can see, what's happening there? Didn't mean to do that. Come back to here. That was what I was trying to do. We can see we've got nice and sharp the strawberries here, nice and sharp at the back, tiny little bit here where it's not quite gone. But that aside, what we've got is we've still got that lovely soft bouquet at the back that, you know, so it feels like you've got that softness which works well with food items particularly, and that kind of close up. But we've also got all the bits in focus that we wanted to have in focus. Now we've got this, you can see not perfectly lined up, but at this point we can go in and we can then crop it how we want to crop it. So you do something like that, and then do the quick camera raw filter, and if we want to just edit it in, we can give a little bit of a vignette. Maybe go to the light, bring the highlights down a bit, bring the shadows up a little bit, maybe give it a little bit of contrast, which also kind of richens the reds out a little bit, and there we go. So this photo is a much better strawberry photo than the bit where only the front bit is in focus. We've now got all the richness and the tastiness, the juiciness of the strawberries, but we've still got that lovely effect as though we were doing a wide aperture shot. And ultimately, it's this kind of thing that I feel is where it works best. So essentially then, conclusions on focus stacking is that what you're looking at is you are trying to get all the bits in focus that you want in focus. So you have to, first of all, you have to make sure that there's the right amount of increments. So if you're trying to get a front to back and you've got a depth of field and those depth of fields don't overlap in the right place, then you will end up with blurry patches in the middle, like what happened with the first cone that I did. I did a 9 increment thing, but there were some sharp bits, but it was alternating between sharp and blurred. I'd not given it enough increments in between. But then you've also got to make sure that if you're taking something, that nothing is moving. So doing stacked photos of a bee, a wasp, actually virtually all these ones that you see of insects, I've come to realise, these macro shots of insects which are really have photo stacking tend to be dead insects for the most part. An insect isn't going to stay still long enough. They're dead, they're frozen, and especially whenever you see an insect which has got lots of little water bubbles on it, nearly always they've been frozen and these little water bubbles, droplets are defrosting. So you need something that isn't going to move or have a moving element in it, which your software isn't going to be able to do. Then you've kind of got to be careful about having something which has got too much staggered front and back and gaps. And if you've got, because the software doesn't necessarily know where the gaps are or where blurred bits are, where it works absolutely at its best tends to be where there's no moving elements and where it's really clear, you know, or where it, I mean, the strawberries work really well because there's a kind of a solid mass. You've not, you know, so it is about finding the right subject matter. But if you find the right subject matter, and to go back to my friend Steve's thing about food photography, he's found food photography is an ideal subject matter for using focus stacking. When you've got a kind of a light situation, you know, a lighting situation where you can control the, where you want to have that kind of, that lovely kind of wide aperture bokeh kind of feel, but at the same time you want to have all the elements kind of lined up, then that's where focus stacking just kind of comes into its own, really. So I hope that's kind of helped. It does feel like it's a little bit kind of complicated. I'm hoping it's not being too laboured. Part of the problem here is that I'd never done focus stacking before, but whilst that's a problem, I'm also seeing this as an opportunity, because what I want you regular viewers, each of you personally watching this, to understand is that I'm the photographer up here doing these podcasts. I'm constantly learning too, that there should never be a limit on our learning. I hadn't done focus stacking before, so in order to be able to do a podcast on focus stacking, I've had to go out and figure out how to do it. In the process of trying to figure out how to do it, I've taken all sorts of wrong turns. That notion of experience is what you gain immediately after you needed it the most. I've gained lots of experience through this. Now I have a far greater understanding of focus stacking, and it's quite possible that is now I will start using this under certain circumstances, so that if I end up maybe doing food photography again, it's quite possibly I will introduce this element, because the quality of the food photography when you've got the bokeh is really good. It's rather lovely. So all that in mind, I would say give it a go. Play with it. Okay. You can go back and pause and see exactly what the steps were if you've got Photoshop here. If you want to know whether you can do it in your own, if you've got a different kind of program, do that. Or in Robert's case, he was using Helicon software. I think he was using a free version of it, or a time limited version of it, to try it out. Okay, a couple more comments here. Oh, April says she likes the shot of strawberries. Robert says once you start using it, it will open up a whole new world. You'll be able to photographs that you can't do with single focal length. April says I can probably capture that kind of picture with my microscope mode setting on my Olympus camera. That's the closest I can get. Sandra says I'm impressed with the focus stack strawberries. John says I agree with Sandra. The strawberry shot worked out really nicely. Meg says, when I look at strawberries, it reminds me of the tennis at Wimbledon in London. Yeah, we need to get some cream on it as well. Sandra says, do you think this would work for a macro flower photography? Macro flower, yes, it would, as long as you're not outdoors and there's a breeze. So basically, if you've got an indoor studio setup, or you're outdoors and it's a completely still day, then yes, I think it would work. But what you've really got to watch out for here, Sandra, is that notion of any form of movement. Nadia says, Sandra, I've used macro on flower photography. So that's okay, excellent. So somebody else has given that one a go and it's worked. Cool. Right. Okay, so hope you found that useful. And in fact, if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, then you can always support them, these podcasts, by going to buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres. Definitely one of the ways you can help support these podcasts. Oh, VG's joined us and says, hello everyone. Hello, VG. Glad you could make it. You've missed the main part about focus stacking, but I'm sure you can catch up with it later. Okay, right. Before you disappear, I'm now going to move on to Nadia. So Nadia sent through an image for feedback. Now, let me go and find all my bits and pieces here. Drag that over there, move that up to there. Nope, not that one. Where am I? Eek. I seem to have lost. One moment. I need to now open up. Hold on. No, that wasn't what I was doing. That's what I was doing. Close that. Open that. Click that up there. Yay! Let's flick over here. This is Nadia's photo. Thank you, Nadia, for sending this in. And Nadia said, this was an evening shot. I'm struggling with how best to crop the image. I feel like there's a little bit too much dead space at the top of the image. Your thoughts would be appreciated. So what Nadia's done here, she's got a picture of the Forth Road bridges, or the road, the rail, in fact, actually, it's the new one got a different name. I can't remember what the new one's called. Anyone know? Drop it into so we have the original Forth rail bridge in the foreground, absolutely iconic rail bridge. Then we've got the Forth Road Bridge in the midground, the original Forth Road Bridge, and then there's the new Forth Road Bridge, which I think is it called the Queensbury Bridge? Can't remember now. Is now in the background. So there's a particular place he's managed to stand and get all three bridges overlapping each other at sunset, or just after the sun has set, just into blue hour, beautiful colours in the sky. But Nadia's feeling that she's not sure she's really getting the crop right, looking for a little bit of feedback on this. So what I would suggest then, let's just open this into Photoshop and start having a think about what we can do. And what strikes me straight away, I think you're right. I think there is kind of, if you like, too much above and below. Now, and if we look at what's the layout of this picture, where's the real interest? And this really is the point, Nadia, I think, the kind of core of a lot of the stuff we do. When we're looking at a photo and we're trying to think, does it work? Is it going to work? And we come down to the core bit, which is, where's the story? Where's the narrative? Where's the bit of interest? When you went down to the bridges and you're seeing the beautiful sunset behind, and you've zoomed in a bit, you've cropped off edges, you've not tried to get the whole width of everything. You're trying to get the sky, you're trying to get a bit of the sea, the Firth of Forth, the water in it as well. But what's really grabbing the attention? What's the bit that's the most interesting part of the photo? And once we understand what that is, then we can start to, that helps inform what we do next. And at this point, what I would really say is, yeah, most of that sky, the top third of that sky, isn't really giving us too much. The real fun, the real flavour, the real exciting part here is where the colours are in the sky and where these man-made strong diagonal lines are crisscrossing right across one of nature's beautiful skies. So it's if we zoom in, it's kind of here which is more interesting, I think. Let's zoom out a little bit. That's still interesting. Once we come to here, it's now feeling like, do we really need the top and the bottom? So if we just go to a straightforward crop, I would really be tempted. We bring this down to about here. Do we need as much? We don't need really. And then likewise, the sea down the bottom isn't really giving us much either. And we can come up to here. And if we go to that, then I think what we have is the essence of everything you wanted. It's still exactly the same shot that you took, but it's distilled it. It's made it more of what you found exciting in the shot. So very simply, cropping out the top and cropping out the bottom. Maybe if you'd actually done a proper full landscape shot rather than a portrait, that might have even caught in a few more bits of interesting bridge. Or maybe it didn't work quite so well there, which is why you made the decision to do that. What becomes interesting here, though, at this point, we can still see we've got the bridge. We've got, we've got the pylons, not the pylon, the stands, which the bridge sits on here, We can still see that very much. But actually, there's an interesting point. When I zoom in here, this starts to get really quite interesting when we kind of essentially remove the ground. When we remove the base that it's on, what happens if we kind of come in here and we take that bit out? So we've actually removed the ground bit. And then what happens then if we come in a bit closer down here? What if we do that? And we're now making something a little bit more, if not cinematic, then certainly a little bit more widescreen. Have we got something here? I think that's quite interesting as well. Now we're kind of coming into a still, but I think, can we go in closer? And maybe we can. Let's take the crop again. What if we actually just get rid of that bottom line of the bridge over there, or even of that bridge? What if we just kind of remove those bottom lines? What if we kind of then come in to where all the lines are starting to overlap with each other, and we do something like this? Now I think this becomes, we're moving into the realms of abstract. At this point, we're not totally sure necessarily what it is we're looking at, and yet there's something intensely pleasing about it. All these straight lines, all these crisscross of lines, fabulously silhouetted against this brilliant sky in the background. So for my money then, Nadia, I think you've got other... Now, obviously at this point, compared to the original image, we've lost a lot of space. There's not a lot of pixels left here. This is maybe, this is only probably about 1800 pixels wide. Fine for a web image, no good for printing up. Now, if you'd have got a big zoom lens, depending on where you were standing, and you managed to zoom in and get something close to this and done it in a landscape format, then I think you'd have something where you'd have even more room to play with it. And certainly if you can get, you live in Fife, I'm presuming you're not too far from here. I don't know whereabouts in Fife exactly you are. But if you can get down there again and the weather's good, and you've got a good zoom lens, then maybe I would say play around with this kind of silhouette idea. I think it's fun. So yeah, options then. I think this notion of getting in actually really close, where to the point whereby it's becoming kind of abstract, I think is fun. Failing that, back a bit more, or here. I think if you are still wanting to show that it is the bridges where we have a little bit of the sea down at the bottom and enough of the sky above to know that, okay, we've got the clouds disappearing. That there gives us a more distilled version of what you were doing than when we had the complete one here. This would work great as a poster where you've then got you've got all the writing on the top, advertising an event. So depending on how the photo is going to be used, if you're talking about there's going to be, some kind of concert going on nearby and you wanted to have this as a background, then having that space at the top to allow for the writing to be put over the top is a great place to have it. But if you're really talking about just this image for the sake of it and you want to crop in and really kind of distill that, then I think cropping it like that gives you that, and I think that works. That is a better version, I think, it's just giving you more intense version of your own photo. And then if you really want to go move it into the kind of realms of abstract, I think you kind of crop off. It's like, remember when we did the fill the frame a few months ago, and at this point we're kind of doing that fill the frame idea. So hope that gives you a few ideas there, Nadia, but thank you for sending that in. Great photo. Love that idea of all those really strong industrial diagonal man-made lines against that beautiful natural sunset. Comments here. Where are we? Okay, a little bit of chat going on between people. Queensbury Crossing, that's it. Nadia says Queensbury Crossing is what the new bridge is called. So there's 3 bridges all lined up. April says nice sky with the 3 bridges. Sandra says lovely sunset shot of the bridges. VG says such a beautiful structure, sky and water beautiful. Meg says that's absolutely incredible. VG says landscape shot would be beautiful. April says beautiful fix. VG says perfect. And are those tiny silhouettes I see, are they people or birds? Now hold on a sec, let's take a little look in. Little dots here. I thought they looked like people, but actually I think they're maybe just part of the structure. Well, it could be people, I don't know. Could be people walking across the bridge. They look like they're maybe just a bit too regular. Those two, yeah, I think if we look at these 2 little blobs here, they're identical to these 2 little blobs here. So my guess is it's part of the structure rather than actually anybody walking along the railway track at that point. Possibly got a vehicle running across the top there. Right. Okay, so actually that notion though of, I've done it again. Sorry about that. I just managed to completely click. Well, I was trying to close the program, and in fact managed to close the browser as well. Okay, Nadia says thank you, Kim. I love the abstract take on it. I'm 15 minutes drive, so we'll go back for that for definite. John also says tight crop really makes for an interesting shot. Okay. Right, so yes, what I was going to say is with that idea of doing a close-up abstract version, that brings us on rather nicely to what we're going to be talking about next week, because Marilyn won the, I think it was, yes, it was Marilyn. I was suddenly thinking, was it Janet? No, it was Marilyn who won the August Smug Points thing. So she set the challenge, and what Marilyn's asked to do is to talk about the notion of abstract. I mean, there we go. I take a picture, I zoom in on it, and I say it becomes quite abstract, and we kind of know what we're talking about. But abstract is one of these things that crops up an awful lot in conversation, and there's an awful lot of contests and challenges like on the likes of PhotoCrowd and Guru Shots and Viewbug and what have you, that you will say abstract, and then you look at things and are they abstract? What counts as abstract? Is one person's idea of abstract not quite the same as the other? In the art world, there's the notion of abstract art, but there's also semi-abstract. And what's the difference there? What does that mean? So what I'm going to do is next week I'm going to investigate the notion of abstract in photography. Where are the definitions? We sort of know, but can we tidy it up a little bit? So that's going to be what, and then what I will do is once I've kind of explored that, I will set a challenge. I will set the challenge for Marilyn for 2 weeks after that will be the abstract challenge. So make sure you tune in next week where we're going to explore this whole notion of abstract in photography and hopefully give you some ideas to go out and play there, stretch your photography, try things out, and then enter the best photo that you can come up with in the intervening couple of weeks into the abstract challenge. So that's what that's going to be about. April says, I really enjoy abstract. That will be interesting. Excellent. Good. Right, so thank you to Robert for coming up with the idea of the kind of focus stacking in the first place. It's been quite a journey for me. I really hope you all feel like you've learned something out of it. And well, some of you may actually give it a go. And of course, if you give things a go and you become stuck, don't forget you can use these podcasts for getting feedback on your photos. Send me your photos. Let me know what your sticking point is, and I will do my best to help you, whether that's with focus stacking, whether that's with cropping, abstract, or any other aspect of it, of photography. I'm here to help. So next week then, abstract stuff. Thank you again to Nadia for sending in her beautiful photo of the bridges across the Forth. And right, yeah, there's a few people saying cheerio, goodbye. Oh, and April says she found that interesting. She enjoys abstract and will find it interesting. Good stuff. Right, I think that's us. Take care, enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you next week. Take care, bye-bye.